The 1980s were not an easy time to tell queer stories on screen. Visibility came with risk. Silence often felt safer. Yet in quiet theaters and small art houses, filmmakers began telling stories that refused to disappear. These were films shaped by desire, fear, love, and survival. Made in a decade defined by loss and resistance, today we're looking at 20 gay films from the 1980s that didn't just exist. They endured, and they still matter. Number 20, Tongues Untied, 1989. Directed by Marlon T. Riggs, Tongues Untied is not structured like a traditional film. It unfolds as a collage of poetry, confession, performance, and memory. Riggs narrates his own experiences as a black gay man in America, confronting racism, homophobia, and the pressure to remain silent. Instead of hiding emotion, the film centers it. Spoken word poetry pulses through the film alongside dance, music, and archival footage. Voices overlap, images repeat, moments linger. The effect feels intimate, as if the viewer is being invited into a private space rarely seen on screen at the time. Riggs moves between personal history and collective experience, connecting childhood, friendship, desire, and grief caused by the AIDS crisis. Rather than offering a linear story, Tongues Untied presents emotional fragments: anger, joy, vulnerability, pride. Poets like Essex Hemphill and Joseph Beam add voices that deepen the film's sense of community. By the end, it becomes both autobiography and protest, a declaration that black gay lives, voices, and love would no longer be erased. Number 19, Longtime Companion, 1989. Longtime Companion begins in 1981 on Fire Island, where a group of friends are enjoying a summer that feels endless. They laugh, fall in love, and plan futures they assume will arrive. Then news reports begin mentioning a mysterious illness, quietly at first, then relentlessly. Directed by Norman Renee, the film follows this group over nearly a decade as the AIDS epidemic reshapes their lives. Relationships deepen under pressure. Loss becomes routine. Names disappear from conversations. What makes the film powerful is its restraint. There is no sensationalism, no manufactured drama, just people trying to keep living while everything around them changes. Performances from Bruce Davison, Campbell Scott, and Mary Louise Parker bring warmth and humanity to characters facing unimaginable uncertainty. Davison's portrayal of physical decline is especially devastating in its dignity. Longtime Companion doesn't attempt to explain the crisis. It simply shows what it felt like to live through it. And that quiet honesty is what makes it endure. Number 18, Looking for Langston, 1989. Looking for Langston, directed by Isaac Julian, is a film built from atmosphere rather than plot. It drifts through dreamlike spaces, Harlem jazz clubs, shadowed bedrooms, and poetic landscapes shaped by longing. Inspired by the legacy of poet Langston Hughes, the film imagines a world of black queer desire that history often refused to document. Dialogue is sparse. Instead, whispered voices, poetry, and music guide the viewer. Images move slowly, lingering on touch, glances, and absence. Archival photographs blend with stage scenes, creating the feeling of memory reconstructed rather than recorded. This is not a biography, it is a meditation. The film explores love constrained by racism and silence, desire hidden in coded language, and beauty preserved through imagination. Its black and white cinematography gives it a timeless quality, as if these stories exist outside history yet are shaped by it. Looking for Langston stands as a cinematic elegy for black gay men whose lives were lived quietly, but not without passion. Number 17, Coming Out, 1989. Released in East Germany just as the Berlin Wall was falling, Coming Out carries an uncanny historical weight. Directed by Heiner Caro, it was the first and only East German film to openly portray homosexuality. The timing alone gives it significance, but its emotional honesty gives it power. The story follows Philip, a young teacher who appears to have a stable life with his girlfriend. Everything changes when he meets Matthias, a man who lives openly gay despite the risks. Philip is drawn to him, but fear and shame complicate every step forward. The film captures the quiet anxiety of living in a society where acceptance feels impossible. Rather than dramatizing conflict, Coming Out focuses on internal struggle. Small moments carry enormous weight. As political walls begin to crumble, Philip faces his own choice between repression and truth. The film's release on the night the wall fell turned it into an accidental metaphor. Personal freedom and political change arriving together, uncertain but irreversible. Number 16. Torch Song Trilogy, 1988. Based on Harvey Fierstein's stage play, Torch Song Trilogy follows Arnold Beckhoff, a drag performer navigating love, loss, and family rejection in New York City. Fierstein plays Arnold himself, bringing vulnerability and sharp wit to a character shaped by both defiance and loneliness. The story unfolds across years, moving through relationships that offer hope and heartbreak. Arnold's romance with a younger model brings tenderness, while the struggle for acceptance from his mother remains unresolved and painful. Anne Bancroft's performance as Arnold's mother avoids caricature, showing discomfort rooted in fear rather than cruelty. What makes the film lasting is its refusal to soften reality. Love does not fix everything. Grief leaves marks, but self-respect becomes an act of survival. Torch Song Trilogy treats queer life not as tragedy or spectacle, but as something ordinary and deeply human. By the end, Arnold's insistence on dignity feels quietly revolutionary. Number 15. The Fruit Machine, 1988. Directed by Philip Saville, The Fruit Machine, also known as Wonderland, begins like a youthful adventure and slowly turns into something far more fragile. Eddie and Michael are two teenage boys in Liverpool, still unsure of who they are and how the world sees them. One night, they witness a murder inside a gay club. From that moment on, everything changes. Forced to flee, the boys travel across England, chased by both the killer and the police. But the danger isn't only physical, it's emotional. Eddie masks fear with humor and bravado, while Michael struggles with shame and uncertainty about his identity. Their bond deepens as safety disappears. Despite its thriller framework, the film is not interested in suspense alone. It focuses on vulnerability, on what it feels like to be hunted not just for what you've seen, but for who you are. Neon clubs, empty streets, and fleeting moments of tenderness shape their journey. The Fruit Machine captures youth suspended between freedom and fear, showing how quickly innocence can fracture in a world that offers no protection. Number 14. Law of Desire, 1987. Pedro Almodóvar's Law of Desire is bold, volatile, and unapologetically emotional. The film centers on Pablo, a gay filmmaker caught between past love and present obsession. He is still attached to his former lover Juan, but begins an affair with Antonio, a young man whose passion quickly turns possessive. As desire intensifies, jealousy spirals into violence. Love becomes indistinguishable from control. Antonio Banderas, in one of his earliest major roles, gives Antonio a dangerous charm that makes his descent unsettling rather than sudden. Pablo's sister Tina, a transgender actress played by Carmen Mora, mirrors his emotional wounds, adding another layer of longing and instability. Every frame bursts with color, excess, and emotional chaos. Almodóvar treats desire as something powerful and destructive, capable of creation and ruin in equal measure. Law of Desire refuses restraint. It embraces obsession, confusion, and contradiction, presenting queer passion not as sanitized romance, but as something raw and deeply human. Number 13. Maurice, 1987. Set in Edwardian England, Maurice tells a story shaped by silence and repression. Directed by James Ivory and based on E.M. Forster's novel, the film follows Maurice Hall, a young man raised in a society where homosexuality is unthinkable and punishable. At Cambridge, Maurice falls in love with Clive, a relationship built on intimacy but constrained by fear. When Clive chooses respectability in marriage, Maurice is left broken, attempting to erase himself through social conformity and even hypnosis. Nothing works. Suppression only deepens his isolation. Everything shifts when Maurice meets Alec, a gamekeeper whose honesty and lack of shame challenge everything Maurice has been taught. Their relationship exists outside class structures and social approval. It is dangerous but truthful. The film ends not with punishment, but with escape. Maurice stands apart from many period dramas by offering hope. Quiet, fragile, but real. Number 12. Prick Up Your Ears, 1987. Directed by Stephen Frears, Prick Up Your Ears explores the volatile relationship between playwright Joe Orton and his partner Kenneth Halliwell. Joe's rise to fame contrasts sharply with Kenneth's growing resentment, creating a power imbalance that becomes impossible to ignore. Through flashbacks and interviews, the film reconstructs their life together. What begins as mutual ambition and affection slowly turns corrosive. Joe's success brings freedom and new lovers. Kenneth's stagnation breeds jealousy and despair. Gary Oldman's portrayal of Orton is electric, full of wit and restlessness. Alfred Molina's Kenneth is quieter, his instability simmering beneath restraint. The film refuses easy villains. Love and cruelty exist side by side. By the time the story reaches its tragic conclusion, the outcome feels both shocking and inevitable. Prick Up Your Ears examines how devotion can curdle into control and how intimacy, when poisoned by envy, becomes destructive. Number 11. Caravaggio, 1986. Derek Jarman's Caravaggio blurs the line between historical drama and modern abstraction. The film imagines the life of the 17th century painter Michelangelo Maurice da Caravaggio through fragmented memories as he lies dying. Time collapses, past and present coexist. Caravaggio's relationships with his model and lover Ranuccio and with Lena, the woman caught between them, are charged with desire, jealousy, and betrayal. Tilda Swinton's Lena embodies quiet tension, while the bond between Caravaggio and Ranuccio pulses with violence and affection. Jarman introduces modern elements, typewriters, electric light, into a historical setting, emphasizing emotional truth over realism. The film reflects the artist's obsession with beauty, born from darkness. Passion fuels creation, but also destruction. Caravaggio presents queerness not as identity politics, but as an inseparable part of artistic intensity and self-destruction. Number 10. Mala Noche, 1986. Shot in grainy black and white, Mala Noche feels less like a film and more like a confession overheard. Directed by Gus Van Sant, it follows Walt, a lonely bookstore clerk in Portland who becomes obsessed with Johnny, a young Mexican immigrant who barely acknowledges him. Walt's desire is immediate and unbalanced. He buys gifts. He offers money. He invents intimacy where none exists. Johnny remains distant, unable or unwilling to return what Walt is projecting onto him. Their interactions are awkward, fragmented, and heavy with misunderstanding. The film avoids romance entirely. There is no mutual fulfillment here. Instead, it lingers on longing that has nowhere to go. Van Sant's minimalist approach, natural lighting, real locations, unpolished performances, creates a documentary-like realism. Streets feel empty, rooms feel temporary. Mala Noche captures the ache of desire when it exists only in one direction, exposing loneliness without softening it. Number 9. Parting Glances, 1986. Set over a single day in New York City, Parting Glances observes ordinary moments under extraordinary pressure. Michael and Robert are a couple preparing for Robert's extended work trip, but the real emotional center lies with Nick, Michael's ex-boyfriend who is living with AIDS. Steve Buscemi's performance as Nick is sharp, funny, and devastating. He masks fear with sarcasm, refusing pity while confronting mortality head-on. The film avoids melodrama, choosing instead to show casual conversations, awkward gatherings, and quiet goodbyes that carry unspoken weight. Friends move through parties and dinners as if life is normal, even as illness hovers in the background. The tension comes from what isn't said. Parting Glances captures a moment in time when joy and grief coexisted daily. It treats queer life not as tragedy, but as something fully lived, humorous, anxious, loving, and unfinished. Number 8. Buddies, 1985. Buddies is one of the first American films to directly confront AIDS, and it does so with striking simplicity. Directed by Arthur J. Bresson Jr., the film centers on two men brought together by circumstance rather than choice. David volunteers to visit Roger, a man dying alone in a hospital room. Their early interactions are tense and uncomfortable. David doesn't know what to say. Roger is defensive and guarded. Slowly through conversation, a bond forms. Stories are shared. Regrets surface. Silence becomes companionship. The setting rarely changes. The power of the film lies entirely in dialogue and presence. As Roger's health declines, David becomes his only connection to the outside world. There are no speeches, no dramatic gestures, just quiet humanity. Buddies insist that care itself is an act of resistance when society turns away. Number 7. My Beautiful Laundrette, 1985. Set in Thatcher-era London, My Beautiful Laundrette tells a story shaped by race, by class, and forbidden love. Omar, a young British Pakistani man, is given control of a rundown laundromat by his wealthy uncle. He decides to rebuild it with the help of Johnny, a white former schoolmate with a violent past. As they work side by side, their friendship evolves into a romantic relationship kept hidden from both communities. Their affection unfolds quietly, surrounded by racism, economic struggle, and political tension. The laundromat becomes a symbol of reinvention, a fragile space of freedom in a divided society. The film refuses moral simplicity. Love exists alongside exploitation. Desire coexists with compromise. Daniel Day-Lewis brings vulnerability to Johnny, while Gordon Warneck's Omar balances ambition and tenderness. My Beautiful Laundrette presents queer love not as escape, but as something negotiated within real-world constraints. Number 6. Another Country, 1984. Set in a 1930s English boarding school, Another Country examines repression as a training ground. Rupert Everett plays Guy Bennett, a student hiding his homosexuality within an institution obsessed with discipline and reputation. His relationship with another boy exposes the hypocrisy beneath the school's moral code. When rumors surface, shame becomes more damaging than truth. Guy's punishment is not physical, but existential. Betrayed by friends and abandoned by loyalty, he grows cynical and defiant. The film later reveals his fate, defection to the Soviet Union, suggesting that exile becomes preferable to conformity. Through flashbacks, the film connects personal repression to political radicalization. Everett's performance captures charm curdling into disillusionment. Another Country shows how systems that fear exposure ultimately manufacture rebellion, turning love into an act of quiet resistance. Number 5. The Wounded Man, 1983. The Wounded Man, directed by Patrice Chéreau, follows Henri, a shy teenage boy whose life changes after a brief encounter with an older man named Jean. What begins as curiosity quickly becomes fixation. Henri abandons school, family, and safety as he follows Jean into Paris's criminal underworld. Jean is charismatic and cruel in equal measure. He offers attention but withholds care. Henri mistakes control for affection, allowing himself to be shaped by someone who has already accepted destruction as a way of life. The film never romanticizes this imbalance. It watches it unfold with discomfort and inevitability. Chéreau films desire as something dangerous when it replaces identity. Sweat, shadow, and claustrophobic interiors dominate the screen. Paris feels less like a city and more like a maze with no exit. The Wounded Man is not about coming of age. It is about losing yourself completely while believing you are finally being seen. Number 4. Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, 1983. Set in a Japanese prisoner of war camp during World War II, Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence explores power, discipline, and unspoken attraction under extreme conditions. David Bowie plays Captain Jack Selliers, a defiant British officer whose presence unsettles the camp's commandant, Yonoi. Their relationship is defined by tension rather than confession. Respect, fascination, and resentment overlap without resolution. Yonoi is drawn to Sellier's refusal to submit, while Sellier seems to understand the danger of that attention. Between them stands Colonel Lawrence, acting as translator and emotional buffer. The film treats desire as something that cannot be named without destroying order. Silence becomes its own language. The final moments are quiet and devastating, emphasizing loss rather than victory. Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence is not a romance or a war epic. It is a study of pride, repression, and longing trapped inside rigid systems. Number 3. Querelle, 1982. Rainer Werner Fassbinder's Querelle exists in a world that feels entirely artificial. Based on Jean Genet's novel, the film follows Querelle, a sailor and criminal whose beauty attracts obsession wherever he goes. His sexuality is fluid, his intentions opaque. The setting is theatrical and surreal. Orange-lit streets, exaggerated gestures, and symbolic spaces replace realism. Desire operates as power. Sex becomes a transaction. Love is inseparable from betrayal. Every character seems aware that they are participating in a ritual rather than a story. Brad Davis plays Querelle with deliberate emptiness, allowing others to project meaning onto him. Fassbinder uses this emptiness to explore guilt, domination, and self-destruction. Querelle refuses emotional comfort. It traps its characters in cycles of lust and punishment, presenting queerness not as identity politics, but as existential defiance against moral order. Number 2. Taxi Zoom KLO, 1980. Shot like a diary, Taxi Zoom Klo follows Andreas, a schoolteacher in West Berlin who lives a double life. By day, he teaches children. By night, he navigates bars, bathrooms, and anonymous encounters in the city's gay scene. Directed by and starring Frank Riplow, the film is confrontational in its honesty. Andreas begins a relationship with Bernd, a man seeking stability and intimacy. But Andreas cannot reconcile commitment with his need for sexual freedom. The tension between these desires becomes unavoidable. The film shocked audiences upon release, but beneath its explicit surface lies loneliness. Andreas' routine offers release without connection. Berlin feels alive, yet isolating. Taxi Zum Klo captures a moment just before the AIDS crisis reshaped everything. It documents freedom with no safety net and pleasure shadowed by emptiness. Number 1. Cruising, 1980. Directed by William Friedkin, Cruising remains one of the most controversial films of its era. Al Pacino stars as Frank Burns, a New York detective sent undercover into the city's leather scene to investigate a series of murders targeting gay men. As Frank immerses himself in this world, boundaries blur. The film offers no clear answers about identity or desire. Frank's sense of self begins to fracture as the investigation deepens. Fear and attraction coexist without explanation. Shot in real clubs with members of the community as extras, the film captures a subculture rarely seen on screen at the time. Its ambiguity unsettled audiences then and continues to divide viewers now. Cruising does not offer reassurance. It leaves discomfort unresolved, forcing viewers to confront how little certainty exists when power, violence, and desire intersect. These films were not made to be easy. They were made to exist in a decade when existence itself was an act of resistance. Some are poetic, some are unsettling. All of them carry the weight of their time. Together, they form a record of stories that refuse to be erased. Which one stayed with you the longest? And which one will you finally watch?